Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 6 now of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. Katie, since we last recorded, a lot has happened. There's been a lot of good, a little bit of bad, not really much bad, just a little bit. We'll talk about just how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'd say I'm doing good. Okay, so, first things first, Katie, before we even talk about the games, before we even get to on the court things, there was some pretty good to happen off the court, and that was a Madden Greenway committed to Kentucky. She, according to ESPN, she's the number 18 player in that class. Four-star point guard. She's literally the first, they have 17 5-stars, and then there's Madden Greenway, the first four-star. I've seen her play in person at Run for Roses in Louisville. Now I haven't seen there's a girl named Kate Harpering who Kentucky has offered. I don't know if they're pursuing her as much anymore, just because they got a commitment from Madden. But she had a really big summer. She went from being a top 30, top 20 kid to number 2 in the class. But I've seen Madden play, in my honest opinion, my humble opinion, she's probably the best player in the class. She committed over Stanford, UCLA, Duke, Clemson, and Iowa. Katie, just a really good get for Kenny Brooks and company.
Yeah, I mean, just like Kaylin Carroll, I haven't gotten the chance to see her play in person, so hopefully that changes very soon. But I'm excited for the way that these next couple of teams are starting to take shape, especially since people were a little bit worried about not having commits yet. But I think that this is just very encouraging.
Yeah, and of course, I think the main reason you're able to get a commitment from her is because her relationship with Kenny really goes beyond the basketball court. Of course, she plays two other sports, really soccer competitively, and she's told me like Kenny came up and watched me play soccer. He watched me play soccer, for crying out loud, and they talk about that. And obviously on the court, it's pretty obvious where he's helped develop Georgia Amore into one of the best point guards in the country. And there's no reason why he can't do that with Madden. Obviously, that's the appealing part there. But Katie, as far as Kenny Brooks goes, away from the court, just a really nice, personable guy. Really can talk to you about anything, and I'm sure that part was just as appealing for Madden too.
Yeah, he's definitely very intentional with, not just his recruits, but also his players, which we see a lot of during press conferences and things like that. He really makes an effort to get to know them as a person rather than just as a player. So I love that about him.
And you're able to pull her away from Iowa, which of course her parents and her dad specifically have a pretty strong legacy at Iowa. Her dad played for the Hawkeyes on the football team, had a decade-plus career playing for the Vikings in the NFL as a linebacker. Source indicated to me that Duke was actually probably the second school there in contention for her. So Duke kind of took 2 L's to Kentucky there in the last week. Katie, I think the main thing is that I think, because once Georgia leaves this season, Kenny's going to have to go to the transfer portal to get, unless he wants to start Cassidy, which is definitely possible. He's going to have to go to the portal, go get his point guard. But Katie, so talking about, after next season, Kentucky's point guard problem has been solved for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. I hope that she can play as a freshman. I hope that she comes out and she's ready as a freshman. Of course, you never know if a freshman is truly ready to play, but I mean, she's very good. I've seen her play in film, so I wouldn't be shocked if she comes and starts immediately.
And the other good thing about her too, excuse me, is that now you have your case. I would say in the 26 class, point guard was the priority. Like that's obvious. Because again, Georgia's leaving. You're gonna need a point guard after next season again. You got your point guard because now you can kind of focus and say, okay, let's go get a wing here or a post player there. Katie, I just feel like it's really nice, this early to be able to get your top target and being able to bring her in.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially in the competition aspect. I mean, he competed with so many great schools to get Madden, and so I think just being able to solidify his spot in the recruiting space is very important since it's his first year at an SEC school. Granted, he was a great recruiter at Virginia Tech, so I'm not shocked that he got Kaylin Carroll and Madden Greenway. But of course, I think just really solidifying that spot and letting people know, like, hey, I'm not here to play. Like, this is serious to me, and I want UK to be the best program that it can be. I think it's just like such a great thing about him.
Now, Katie, Saturday was awesome because you got a commitment from Madden, but it got made even better whenever Kentucky snapped that losing streak to Louisville. Nobody beats Kentucky 8 times in a row, right? Kentucky wins 71-61 in overtime. I mean, I feel like that, I think I tweeted this out at the time. Katie, I felt like that was written in the stars. Like Kenny Brooks, Jeff Walls, everything that was at stake. Of course that game had to go to overtime.
I mean, yeah, it's like a long-time rivalry. You got to play as long as you possibly can. So, of course, it's going to go to overtime. It just seemed right. And for Kentucky to come out on top, again, I think it's one of those things that solidifies the state of the program right now. This is not the old Kentucky. This is the new Kentucky. This Kentucky is good, and they're going to be good for a long time. And I think that Kenny Brooks having his first big win within the first 5 games that he's coached at Kentucky is so huge.
I think for me, the thing that was so great is that, Kentucky, they started and it was back and forth the whole game. And then Louisville would go on these little runs where every time Kentucky would try to make it a one-possession game, there would be, they would score 3 or they would get a momentum play. I mean, Amari Berry, who committed to Louisville over Kentucky, had her best game as a Cardinal. She had, I'm pretty sure, 3 possessions in a row where she had 3 after 3 after 3, and all of a sudden Louisville's back up 8 or 9 points. It's just no matter how frustrating the situation was, Katie, Kentucky just kept fighting.
Yeah, one thing I definitely loved about this game was the endurance that Kentucky showed because Kenny played his starting 5 basically the entire time. Georgia Amore played all 45 minutes of the game. Deja Lawrence played, I think, about 39. Clara Strack played like 42 or 43. And I think that it just goes to show the conditioning that this team has, the ability to stay in, like, Louisville has a very deep rotation, a very deep bench. And I guess during that game, Kentucky didn't really have that deep of a bench. I mean, Kenny tried to play Clara Silva and he tried to play Cassidy Rowe. And I think they got a combined, like, 4 or 5 minutes of play. So he didn't use a deep bench at all. And I think that he has a lot of confidence in our 5 starters, and they are very in shape.
Yeah, and I actually don't know if I love that for the future because when you get to playing these great teams, and and we'll get to them in a minute, but Kentucky's got 2 games coming up. Really, it's really like 4 of your next 5 games are against major conference opponents. And it's because obviously the starters are going to bring it because they kind of have to. But can you go to a bench to allow your starters to rest? Because Katie, if we go on this pace, we'll get to January and our starters will not be able. They'll have jelly legs. They won't be able to run. I'm just talking about the stats of that Louisville game. Deja Lawrence, 14 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. Katie, at the end of regulation, and I was so distraught for her because she had played so good all game, and then she misses 2 free throws to kind of put it away. And then next possession, Louisville ties it. We go to overtime. I'm pretty sure they were knotted at 58 heading into overtime. Katie, I don't know about you, but when it got to overtime, it made me so happy whenever Kentucky got that stop on defense, or they forced a turnover, and it was Deja who kind of made the layup to seal the deal. I just thought really nice game for her, and she's played, I think, really well through these first 5 games now.
And, people, of course, get frustrated whenever players miss their free throws because they're called free throws for a reason. They're supposed to be free. And a lot of times when you're at the collegiate level, they're supposed to be automatic, but sometimes they just aren't. And I think that when she got that turnover and that layup, she kind of redeemed herself in that way. I feel like she knew it too. When she missed those free throws, she was obviously disappointed, but I loved her poise and how she didn't let that affect her play. She still played hard. She knew that they could win, and she did what she needed to do, and she recovered from that.
Someone else who I thought showed a lot of poise was Georgia Amore. 19 points, 9 assists, and 2 steals. Katie, probably not. She had 8 turnovers. Not her greatest game, just all around. But, those stats I laid out, obviously good stats. But, Katie, Jeff Walls talked about a post-game. He was like, no matter how rattled we got her, she didn't show it on her face. I just think, obviously she's the leader of the team, everything like that. It's just really – and she's the point guard. She kind of just by nature has to be the leader. But I think it's so nice, Katie, to have someone there at the point, at the one, who can help get Kentucky through the finish line, being calm and collected and really showing that fifth-year senior veteran, those tendencies there.
Yeah, and what's so interesting to me about Georgia is that her stats are always all over the place. And I feel like when you watch her play, at least through these first 5 games, sometimes you're thinking, okay, well, she's not really having that great of a game. And then you look at the stat sheet, and all of a sudden she scored 20 points and has like 10 assists or whatever she had. And, she shot 7 of 17, so not the most efficient, but she, like I said, had 9 assists, 8 turnovers, not efficient, but she had a block and 2 steals. And granted, she's playing all 45 minutes. So when you kind of map that out, it's really not that unusual, I feel like, to have that many turnovers when you're handling the ball for 45 minutes of the game.
Right. Katie, you want to talk about turnovers? Tiani Key. I don't remember how many she had off the top of my head. I don't have those stats written down. But Katie, Tiani Key, she had, hold on, we can see it now. She had 7. She had 7 turnovers herself. As bad as that was, she still had a pretty decent game too. 17 points, 9 rebounds, 5 blocks for Tiani. She actually came in really clutch there with those blocks. She had some big rebounds, some big blocks, but I just felt like in overtime, really, when Louisville was about to try to make it close again, Tiani, nope, never mind, not close. And I'm just really good game for Tiani all around too.
Yeah, and what I loved about her game was that she got into some foul trouble, and at the end of regulation, she had 4 fouls. So going into overtime, she had to be very, very careful because at this point, she had kind of gotten over the slump of like not playing that great. And in the second half, she came out and she started scoring. She started playing better defense, but she had to be very careful. And I think when we got into overtime, she did a really great job of remaining calm and doing her job on defense. She was still aggressive, but she wasn't too aggressive to the point where she was committing fouls. And so she got a couple of great blocks that probably put the nail in the coffin for Kentucky. And she did all that without fouling, and she stayed in the game and she was there for her team.
Yeah, just you can tell she had ACC experience. You could tell she wasn't a freshman, and I think she came in, she showed that. And then Claire Strack, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks herself. Not her best game scoring the ball. You could tell they tried to feed it down to the post. Jeff Wall's pretty good defensive coach. He got onto that pretty quick. But even then, it's kind of like the theme of this game. It's like, even though it wasn't your best, it was just good enough to get us over the hump.
Yeah, I feel like one of Louisville's main targets probably during their film and preparation for this game was Clara Strack, and they did a great job at controlling her and making sure she didn't go off for 25 points like she had been. So she did her job, and of course it was difficult for her to score, but 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, like you said. She was productive, she was efficient, and I think that she did a good job. She can do better, and Kenny said that in the press conference, but I think this was a good game for her to kind of work on playing a real physical team like that.
And Katie, we just read all those stats. None of them are my MVP of the game. My MVP, she only scored 9 points. And you would think that Phoenix, you sound silly for saying this, but Amelia Hassett, if you listen to my reaction or if our rapid reaction, or if you follow the tweets, I was saying stone cold Amelia Hassett because, I think there is nothing but, Arctic ice water running through her veins. It didn't matter what the situation was. Anytime Kentucky needed a big momentum-changing rebound, she got it. She had 13 of those against Louisville. Katie, I don't know if you remember, but in overtime, who was it that kind of hit the free throws to make it a 7, 8, 9, 10-point game? Amelia Hassett, just, coming up from Eastern Florida State College and not having any experience against a big-time school like Louisville. Katie, she played her butt off, and she was fantastic against the Cardinals.
Something very interesting about Amelia is that she doesn't get a lot of production from the field. Most of her production comes from the free throw line, at least what we've seen so far. And I remember Kenny talking about her having the green light to shoot threes, but she doesn't really do that. And I don't think it's because she's scared to do it. I think she just knows that her talents lie elsewhere. And I think that she's great on defense and she's just a great team player. I feel like the chemistry when she's on the floor is so much higher because I feel like she's kind of a link between the bigs and the guards to be that middle size, I can be aggressive in the post or I can be on the wing and handle the ball if you need me to. And so she did play really good, even if she didn't lead the team in scoring. I think that she did exactly what she needed to do.
Right. And of course, the best part about that game, Katie, was kind of after the game. And the women's team, shout out to the social media team they put out a video, kind of like if you follow the men's basketball team on Twitter, you're probably familiar with the Journey videos of they're kind of recapping big wins. They did that for the Louisville game. And there's this video of Kenny talking in the locker room, and he's like, this part was pregame where he's like, know what you play for, this is big. And he said, this is our state. And he was like, this is our state. You don't get a lot of these, so enjoy it. And then I thought it was so cool post-game where he goes in the locker room and he's like, this is our state. And they celebrate with the water. I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love how he's just taken this role as coach, and not just as coach, but as representative of the state so seriously. I feel like it's easy to look over the fact that he was so into Virginia Tech and he was very passionate about it, but he knew it was time to move on. And now he comes to Kentucky and he loves this state and he loves this fan base. And I remember him talking about not being able to go to Kroger without being recognized because Big Blue Nation is so passionate. And I think that he just takes that with full force and he loves it and he uses it to his advantage in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about him at Virginia Tech. I know post-game I asked him something about the rivalry, and he was like, we had some really good games against Louisville in the ACC. We played them in the ACC championship game, and by the way, that crowd there sold out. When a historic Memorial Coliseum is sold out, it's one of the best environments in the country, and I don't think there's any disputing that. And he said, this was probably just as good as or better than our ACC championship game crowd. And he said, it's one thing when it's maroon and orange versus red, but it's a whole different thing when it's red versus blue. I thought that was a great line.
Yeah, I love that line.
And then, following that game, Katie, I was curious to see where Kentucky would fall, or not fall, but where Kentucky would lie in the AP poll. Kentucky's up to number 15 now. You look at that, and most of that top 15 is undefeateds. I would say Kentucky probably should be at 14 above Duke, but Duke's, they're a good team. I can kind of understand it. Kyra Elsie, one up on Kentucky so far, but we'll see how that goes for the rest of the season. Katie, after that Louisville game, I going into the game, I told you I was nervous about it because it just felt like a perfect trap game. I mean, emotional roller coaster against Louisville. 48 hours later, you have to play Purdue Fort Wayne. Now, if it weren't for their name, obviously Purdue Fort Wayne, I mean, obviously not that far up there in Indiana, but otherwise, what in the world is a mastodon? I'm assuming it's an elephant because that's what their mascot was. Katie, they came in and they played hard. They made it ugly and disgusting and really bad to watch for Kentucky. But still, Kentucky comes out on top 79-67. Just like I said, wasn't pretty, but Katie, Kentucky got it done.
Yeah, I mean, when you have one day in between such a big game, especially such a big overtime game where you play every single one of your starters for the straight 45 minutes, they don't have time to truly rest. And I think that's what this game was a game that is almost like a mock NCAA tournament. It's kind of like what we're going to see. They're going to play a game, hopefully win, and then have to come out and play another huge game right after that. And even though this game against Purdue Fort Wayne wasn't a huge game, it definitely would have been so terrible had he won to Louisville and then lost to this random team in Indiana right after. So
right, or you go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that, this game, it looked like it was going to be a trap game. I remember Kenny saying in the press conference he didn't want to call it that because he knew going into it that this team was a very good three-point shooting team, and he knew that, his players' legs were tired. He knew that they were going to be a little sluggish, and so he wasn't necessarily worried that they wouldn't win, but he knew that if they didn't, he wouldn't be surprised.
And what I was gonna say before I cut you off, I was just gonna say, like, whenever mock NCAA tournament, when you get to that point, you're gonna play against teams that have nothing to lose, and that's exactly what Purdue Fort Wayne did. Katie, Kentucky shot just 40% from the field, had four players with 4 fouls. It's not a great game as far as that went. But Georgia Amore, she had 23 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds. Again, not her most efficient night, just productively, offensively. She made it a good amount of threes, but it felt like anytime Kentucky needed a bucket, she was the one to go get it, and I actually do like that much. I think there's a difference which there was a little bit of both, where there's a difference in Georgia Amore goes and gets you a bucket whenever you need it, versus which we saw a lot of just the whole offense runs through her. And Katie, that's not good because you have so much talent around Georgia. And I get it. She's your leader, All-American point guard. But it can't be 1 versus 5 out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, especially because in the first half, she was only shooting 1 of 8, and obviously that's not very good at all. Kentucky was down going into the half, and we could tell that it was going to be difficult for them to come out and get any kind of momentum going. But luckily, Deja Lawrence was kind of going off in the first half, and she was that momentum for Kentucky. I believe she had 15 points in the first half. But we asked Georgia after the game in the press conference, what were you thinking at the half, and what made you realize like you have to come out and do something different? And she said that instead of being passive with the ball, instead of being, a sharer, instead of being an assister like she usually is, she knew that she had to get it done herself. And even though her other teammates stepped it up as well, I really enjoyed seeing her actually be aggressive with the ball and take the shots and make them.
Yeah, it just feels like to me, which that's, it's like I said, like Georgia, she went and got the bucket whenever you needed, and like you said, where she was like, okay, I'm aggressive and go do this. I feel like there's just a fine line between those two things, and then okay, we can only, it's Georgia Amore ISO ball, or it's dribble handoff and please Georgia get around a screen. I hope, and then, again, in these 4 next 5 games in this stretch you have, hoping to see something else happen. Katie, you talked about Deja. How about her? She had 21 points, season high for her, 8 of 15 from the field, 5 of 8 from the 3-point line. Katie, the only reason Purdue Fort Wayne wasn't winning by 15 at the half was because Deja Lawrence came ready to play.
Yeah, I think that something I've noticed about Deja is her games have just been getting better and better and better. It's like her confidence is building game by game, and I think that Louisville game really helped her out in that way. Because I feel like I remember some kind of conversation about Deja not having great games at the beginning, and we don't really know why, and Kenny saying, okay, well, she'll get there. Like, I promise she will get there because I see her, and I see her as a player, and I know what she can do. And so this game was great for her, 21 points, and I'm hoping that this streak continues and she can be that scorer if we need a bucket, instead of having to rely on Georgia for the entire offense. Like, give the ball to Deja and let her do her thing.
Right, and then you had Clara Strack and Tiani Key, who Strack had 14 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks, and Tiani Key had a 12-point, 10-rebound double-double with 5 blocks of her own. Katie, we talked about, wanting to get more people involved in the offense. I feel like those two, 14 and 12, I feel like they both easily average like 16 and 18 if we were to maybe employ them in the best way possible.
Yeah, but I mean Clara Strack, she didn't really have were you talking about Tiani and Amelia?
Just now?
Yeah, I just zoned out.
I was talking Tiani and Clara Strack.
Okay, that's what I thought. So Clara Strack, she didn't have the best game because we talked about this a lot during the game and afterwards of this shot that Clara had where she would turn around and fade away right around like the middle section of the key. But it just wasn't going in for her. There was like hardly any shots going in for her, actually. I mean, she shot 3 of 13 from the field. So she made 6 points from the field. 8 of her points came from the free throw line because she is aggressive on the post and she draws those fouls, but it was just an off day for her. And, we know that she can do better than that. And I expect to see her do better than that. So hopefully these last 2 games have just been kind of a hitch. And when we get into conference play or this Music City Classic especially, I feel like will be a huge test for her to see where her production actually lies.
Let me say, 14 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks for Strack. If that, and I agree, she wasn't playing at her best, but Katie, that's a lot better than we got last year because that was probably the best we got of a lot of the players from last season. Of course, now it's a little bit different. Cassidy Rowe, Katie, she only had 6 points, shot 2 of 5 from 3-point range. Katie, I think she made the momentum plays that kind of got Kentucky in firm control of the game. Offensively, she hit the big 3 whenever you needed it. Defensively, she made the big stop whenever you needed it. Katie, is Cassidy Rowe, in the postgame press conference, it's usually Kenny Brooks and the best player who performed that night. But it was Kenny Brooks, Georgia Amore, and Cassidy Rowe, after that Purdue-Fort Wayne game because of how well she played.
Yeah, and I was really happy to see Cassidy play the way that she did because, after only getting 2 minutes versus Louisville, finally having about 30 minutes against Purdue-Fort Wayne, we got to see her in action. And even though she scored only 6 points, I think that she was very valuable to the offense and the defense. She's aggressive, and we know she knows how to take charges. We know that, she's a coach's kid, so she's learned day in and day out how to react to things. I mean, basketball is her life, and you can clearly see that on the court, is that she just takes it so seriously. So I was happy that she finally got her chance.
And now, Katie, we just recapped 2 games, but now we have to preview 2 games just because of the nature of the beast and what we're doing. Kentucky heading down to Nashville for the Music City Classic. Kentucky will play Arizona State and Illinois, so 2 major conference teams there. Both games are on Baller TV. Now, Katie, I couldn't tell you what in the world Baller TV is. That sounds made up. It sounds like I made that in a journalism class up here. But, if you can't watch the game, if you can't find the game, I'm sure you can at least follow with our live blog and our game thread that we do here on KSR. Kentucky play Arizona State first on that Tuesday at 4:30. They're not a very good team. I'll say that confidently. And if we lose against them, you all can hold your pitchforks up to me after that. They're 3-2 with losses to Arkansas State and Grand Canyon. Okay, just 2 very bad losses there. They do have a couple of really good players, though. It's kind of like it'll be 2 versus, 8 or 9 when we get to the game. But they have senior guard Taya Skinner, 21 points per game and 46% from 3-point range. Katie, I feel like that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little worried about this stretch of games just because they are one right after another, but I think that having this Arizona State game first is kind of an advantage in a way because I think it will give Kenny a chance to empty the bench a little bit, but of course they are good. I mean, they shoot 40-something% from 3, which is what Purdue-Fort Wayne did, and we saw how little Kenny emptied his bench. I mean, he didn't hardly at all, so I think that this will be another one of those games where we expect Kentucky to win, but it might be a little bit of a hitch, especially towards the beginning. But I do think that Kentucky will win.
Right, and part of the reason for that, this is going to be the biggest team Kentucky, and maybe the biggest team we play all year, and they're actually bigger than we are. And I did not know if that was possible or not. Katie, they have players that are 6'7", 6'5", 6'4". They have 4 girls who are 6'3" and 1 who is 6'2", and that's not even counting the other 6-footers on their team. So Arizona State, if nothing else, they're a big team. They also have junior, someone else who's not as tall. They have junior guard Jalen Brown. She does not play for the Boston Celtics. She averages 15.6 points per game and shoots 37% from 3. So again, looks like just Arizona State's just a really big team. But they have a couple of guards who have a knack to score the ball and who can shoot the ball from deep.
Yeah, the size mismatch might cause a little bit of trouble, but again, we have tall players too. I think the only players who might struggle with it are those who aren't 6 foot. So, you have Cassidy Rowe and Georgia Amore, and I think that those are basically the only two besides Sanaya Tyler. And so I think that Georgia is obviously good enough to be able to adjust to play against someone way taller than she is, and I think Cassidy is too. So even though it might be a little bit of trouble at first, I don't think it'll turn out to be the end-all be-all of the game.
And there's Deja too. I think she's only 5'8", but
Yeah.
defensively it'll be questionable. See if she can hold her own. I think offensively Deja will be just fine.
Yeah.
That Wednesday, Kentucky plays against Illinois, 8 o'clock. Katie, Illinois, they ended last year on a hot streak. They went into it's because there's the women's NIT, but there's also the women's basketball invitational tournament, the WBIT. Well, they went on to win that last year, and they finished last year 19-15. And of course, now they're number 22 in the country after getting some pretty big wins, namely an upset win over Florida State. Heading into this game, Katie, I was kind of just looking at some of the numbers. ESPN's analytical system, okay, gives Kentucky a 23% chance to win this game. And it's on a neutral court. Kentucky won't have home court advantage. Now, they won't be on the road either, which that's helpful. But, you're not going to have the crowd behind you. This is a really good Illinois team. Mm-hmm. Actually, Katie, before we even get to the talent they have on their roster, I hope I'm wrong, but we did this. We know in our preseason picks, I still think this is probably our first loss of the season.
I would have to agree with that. I think that I had this down as a loss. I think that Kentucky will put up a good fight, but I do think that this Illinois team is very good, especially with their win against Florida State. So, I do feel like this could go either way, but I think it's too good to be true for Kentucky to start the season 7-0. I just don't see that happening.
And and if you do, that is awesome. If you come out 7-0, then you had, in December 5th, you go into that North Carolina game, and now all of a sudden, not that you have nothing to lose, because you do. You have a perfect record to lose. But you go into North Carolina, and it's like, well, why not be 8-0? And why not on December 14th when you play a Purdue team that's why not be 9-0? And all of a sudden you're top 10 team in the country. But, obviously you can't look ahead that far. We can, because we don't play the games. We don't coach the team. But, there's this game we have to talk about. And speaking of the Fighting Illini, senior forward Kendall Bostic, 14.8 points per game, 10.8 rebounds per game. I think she's their best player. I remember seeing her name kind of float around last season. Just when I started following kind of around the country, I remember her name as someone who's really good for them.
Yeah, that name definitely rings a bell. I can't say that I have really looked into Illinois that much yet, but I do remember Kendall Bostic being one of their best, if not the best player for them last year, and she kind of led them to that win in the MIT and the WBIT, but I can't really say much else because I don't know who she could match up with. I don't really know her stats or anything like that. So,
yeah, and it's just one of those things. She's not super tall from what I remember. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I do think she'll be able to hold her own definitely against Kentucky. And if they're not careful, she can have a super big game. Then you have senior guard Adalia McKenzie, 14.3 points per game, 5 rebounds per game. Just another one of those players who got to get it done. Again, you'll come to see Illinois is a really good all-around team. No surprise there. And just adding, Adalia's skills, that definitely helps bolster what they have.
Mm-hmm. I feel like big thing for this game against Illinois is just going to be perimeter defense and making sure that nobody can drive to the basket. I think that is what hurt us a lot against Louisville. And if we let Illinois do that, then they're going to walk all over Kentucky. I mean, all over them. They're not going to be able to do anything about it because how are you supposed to defend that whenever the size matchup is practically the same and you're just letting them walk in there and shoot layups and make them all?
Right. And Katie, they have two other guards who I'll go over pretty quick. It's Gretchen Dolan and Makira Cook. Both average around 12 points a game, and they can shoot the ball pretty well. But, Katie, I wanted to get to sophomore guard Jasmine Brown-Hager. And it depends how thick in the weeds you were of it last year, how deeply you followed it last year, she played at Mississippi State last year. So you may know her name. She averages 11 points per game, but she's shooting 50% from three. Now, obviously, those stats, 50% sounds insane, and it's good, obviously, but I don't know if her volume is totally there as far as how many threes she's shooting. But Jasmine Brown Hager, with Mississippi State, I remember she was a name when I scouted them last year because we do our scouting reports for all these games. I was like, okay, this is someone who's Kentucky's going to have to keep an eye on. And obviously, we would have to play Mississippi State again this year. But whenever she transferred out, I was like, oh, good, we don't have to play her. But now she's at Illinois, and that's going to have to be another player, amongst all of these players that Kentucky and Kenny Brooks are going to have to really pay attention to.
I do remember her, and I believe against Kentucky, she at Mississippi State, I don't think that she played all that much because she was a freshman, right? So I'm eager to see her this year, to see how far she's kind of come from last year, especially moving from SEC to I actually don't know what conference Illinois is in.
Big Ten. They're in the Big Ten.
I almost said that, but I didn't want to be wrong. So, yeah, going from Big Ten is huge. I mean, they have like Ohio State, who is also ranked, and so just to see her go from an aggressive conference to probably a more aggressive conference is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's always funny. That's kind of the nature of the Big Ten because the SEC is obviously big and physical. But when you get to the Big Ten, it's like every game is like 50 to 55, and it's like boring to watch, but still good basketball nevertheless. Big Ten pretty good, especially with the additions of UCLA and USC and Oregon, just really making that conference better. Katie, to wrap this thing up, as far as I know, we got some KS Board questions for us.
Yes, we do. Quite a few today, so that's really good. Thank you guys for asking questions. The first one comes from Me Too, and they ask, what's your read on why Brooks doesn't go to his bench more? Is it just a lack of trust?
I'm not totally sure if it's a lack of trust in the bench players as much as it is he just really trusts his starters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, against Louisville, you had to do that to win that game. I mean, it's one of those things, would you rather feel good and everybody gets their playing time and everything is rainbows and sunflowers, or would you rather win basketball games?
Mm.
And, you'd rather win basketball games. That's just how it is. And so, you're going to have to play your best players, and I know it's not ideal, and I know it's really not ideal for later in the season when fatigue and everything and potential injuries start to set in. But, Katie, I don't look right now. I'm not worried about the lack of use of the bench. I'm maybe in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, let's see how that looks 2 months from now. But as of right now, I'm not necessarily worried about the bench.
I think that what I worry about more is putting too much pressure on your starters and just, you have to start the game and you have to start good, but you also have to end the game and you have to win it. And so I kind of would like to see more bench action, but of course, if they shouldn't be on the court, I don't want them on the court. I want the players who are going to be able to come out with the win on the court. And I think that right now, it's the people who've been playing, the 7 consistent people who have been playing.
Right.
Okay, so next question comes from an anonymous account. It says, I'm a little surprised with how much Amor is turning the ball over. I don't know if she's always been like that, but just want to know your thoughts on that.
She maybe, not 8. She doesn't average 8 turnovers per game, but just being a point guard, being a pass-heavy point guard, she turns the ball over a little bit. But yeah, definitely not to that degree. Jeff Walls has coached against her for 4 years now, or I guess 5 years now. I think eventually you're going to figure out, okay, how do we, get her to turn the ball over? And he literally talked about that post game where he's like, that's our plan, get Georgia to turn the ball over. And obviously it worked. Didn't get Louisville a win, but it did get, it did allow them to lead for much of that game and even send it to overtime. Katie, I'm not super worried. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's just super early in the season. I just don't feel like I have the I just don't feel like it's right for me to be super worried about anything, considering how early it is in the season. But the turnovers, like the volume is definitely not great. Like you don't want that, but I expect that to slow down.
I agree with that, and I think that what we've been seeing a lot of too are these crazy passes, and I called them prayer passes the other day because I felt like players were just kind of throwing them and hoping that someone would catch them. And I feel like, especially against Louisville, Georgia did that quite a few times, just trying to get the ball out of her hands because they're defending her so hard she can't get anything going. So throwing the ball over top of a defender and just hoping that it goes into one of her teammates' hands, I just don't think is the most productive, but I'm not worried about it either. Okay, so Jacob Polacek asked, how much emphasis do you expect Brooks to place on the transfer portal this offseason?
It depends on what the roster kind of looks like following the season. I mean, I know that's the easy answer, obviously. Bringing in Kalen Carroll helps a lot because that's one less wing he's going to have to go get. But, Katie, you bring in, I mean, because Georgia and Deja have to go. Let's say you return 10 players and you bring in Kalen, so it's like 11. Well, now do you really need the portal that much? I mean, yes, you're going to go for – I mean, obviously, no matter what, he's going to the portal for the point guard, and we'll see who that point guard ends up being. But as far as everything else goes, maybe one or two players, maybe. I just don't see a ton of use in the portal, but I think that's because they're just expecting to bring over so much talent from this year to next year, and that's obviously a good thing, building up that continuity.
I think in the case that there isn't a lot of roster retainment from this year to next, I feel like the name of the game nowadays is transfer portal because we see schools like TCU become powerhouses because they get Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince through the transfer portal just like randomly. And I feel like if something were to happen where the talent that Kenny wants is not retained from this year to next year, then I think he'll put a lot more focus on the transfer portal. We could see like 3, 4, 5 people come in maybe, but that's just in the case of if, he doesn't keep who he wants to keep.
Right.
So Digger808 had a few questions asking about Hassett, Key, and Strack, who were given the green light to shoot threes earlier in this season, but have only shot 5 threes in games 4 and 5 combined, and are all 3 0-5 from the perimeter. He said, in Key and Strack's case, they seem to be hesitant to shoot, and in Hassett's case, it feels like because she's not getting open looks. Will the coaching staff continue to encourage Key and Strack to shoot, and are they going to start scheming up plays to get Hassett open looks?
As far as Hassett goes, you would hope so. But I think the whole offense, I mean, obviously it seems like it's Georgia A more dominant, and it is right now. But I think really the whole thing is because you see a lot of dribble handoff, you see a lot of picks, a lot of rolls. They're just trying to, and this is a really pass-heavy offense too. And I think sometimes to a fault. I think everybody on this team is so key on, okay, I have a good shot, but I can get a better shot. And it's like, well, just take the good shot. Like, I mean, you have an open three, shoot it. Or, if you have a lane to the hoop, well, take it. It's there. Just go take it. But as far as Strack, Key, and Hassett go, yes, they're going to be continued to be encouraged to shoot because that's what we have to have for this team to be good. If we get to the new year and only Georgia Amore and Deja Lawrence can score the ball, this team's just not going to be very good.
Yeah, I think that if I'm remembering correctly, Strack is supposed to be a very good three-point shooter, but she had some kind of minor thumb injury. It was probably just some kind of stub. So just maybe on her shooting hand or something like that, that Brooke said that she's getting over. And that she will be one of the best three-point shooters on the team. And he's very confident in that. So I think that we'll definitely be seeing more from her. But I do feel like since she's been missing so much, she hasn't been shooting as much. Because I remember games her going 0 of 5 from 3. And then these past 2 games, she's only shot a 3 once or twice. So that's definitely an interesting turn of events. But I am looking forward to seeing more of Amelia Hassett. And Tiani Key has just been so dominant in the paint recently that I don't know how much of her we will be seeing on the perimeter, but again, I hope to be seeing more there. So Digger808 also asked, Amor is averaging 37 minutes a game, and inevitably she's going to get into foul trouble at some point. So, how do you think the offense will change with her off the floor for long stints? And do you think other players will be able to show out with her off of the floor? Or will the offense get gummed up without the floor general?
No, and see, that's the part that I'm really interested to see. It's funny it's funny Digger 808 there. It's funny they mentioned that because I kind of want to not I don't want to see Georgia foul out of a game, but I want to see Georgia off the floor for 5 minutes, right? I want to see put Cassidy at the point and let's see what this team does. I want to see sets where it's, and we talked about this last question, where Amelia Hassett is open for a three, or sets where it's for Deja to get a shot or something for the girls in the post. But you just have to find a way to make it not Georgia Amor dominant. But I think whenever Kenny is, obviously he has to think in the back of his mind. He knows that once Georgia gets into foul trouble, things have to adjust because you cannot do this dribble handoff thing with Cassidy Rose. She's not as talented as Georgia Amor, and it's going to be interesting to see. And I believe it'll be the case that Kentucky will have to adjust, and I think they will. And I think obviously that would lead to other players being able to score more and, as he said, be able to shine in that spotlight more.
Yeah, I know that I think we thought originally that Cassidy would be this replacement for Georgia, but recently she's been a replacement for Deja, and they just obviously have been keeping Georgia in this whole time. So it's Georgia and Cassidy running the offense and not Cassidy and Deja. So I do think that would be interesting to see, and I feel like it's going to have to happen at some point. I just don't know when that will happen.
See, I feel like in some cases, like it could make the offense better. Like, because Georgia, it almost, and this is going to sound so weird because it's not like that. Then it's not a similar style of play at all, but just in the nature of how it goes. Whenever Oscar Tshiebwe was at Kentucky, he was obviously an excellent player who dominated in his own right. Probably should have his name hung up in the rafters. I know that's a debate. Probably should at some point. But there was that whole thing around Oscar is he worse for the offense? Like is he like not ruining, but like is he like holding this offense back? Now, I'm not saying that is Georgia Amor, but I think there's an interesting comparison to be made there where it's, well, when everything is being ran through Georgia, is that holding back? Deja's still getting hers, but is that holding back your Amelia Hassett's and Tiani Keys from being able to score there on the wings or being able to produce offensively? I do think that is an interesting thing to think about. We'll see later in the season just how much that really is the case or not. But in the back of my mind, obviously Georgia's a superstar player and you need her on the floor to win basketball games. But just how much – how much is she really helping the offense versus taking away from it? I think it's going to be interesting to see that moving forward.
So Cats fan 117 asked, what do you think the keys will be come SEC play against tougher competition?
Just it's pretty obvious, just physicality. I know Kenny Brooks post game said, like talking about Clara Silva, who played 5 minutes last game, said it's not even the physicality part. And obviously that may be true for Clara Silva, but I think as a team, it's what are you going to do against these bigger, more athletic girls?
Yeah.
You can't do this dribble handoff stuff against the bigger, more athletic girls. They'll eat you alive, and you'll lose by 20 to Texas. You'll lose by 20 to LSU. South Carolina will beat you by 40 if you run the same stagnant 1 to 2 dribble handoff plays the entire game. But I say all that just because it's going to be important to see this team progress. It's going to be important to see, in these non-conference games. And I think that these next 4 of the next 5 games are going to be really telling of where Kentucky is going to be at heading into January and February, and then, of course, March.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more consistency. I feel like that just comes with reps. And then, like you said, Clara Silva. I want to see more of her, but I also don't want to see her until she's ready, until she can contribute to this team in a positive way. And then Cats fan also said that they would like to see more creativity out of the offense and less Georgia go, make something happen plays. And I really do agree with that because she can't always make something happen. And she's not always going to be able to make something happen against really good SEC teams like South Carolina and Texas. So I think that creativity is going to be a huge key come SEC play.
Yeah, for sure.
So JQUK asked, has the start of the season changed our minds at all with the expectations for the team for the rest of the season?
For me, no. I know after the Louisville game, a lot of people reached out to me and like, dude, are we going to make the Final Four? Are we going to – I just don't see it. And that's not to say that this team isn't good because obviously they are. I just don't want to, after that Louisville game, emotionally change my expectations very drastically. I still think this is a 19-20 win basketball team. You know, there's only 28 games in the regular season compared to 31 on the men's side, right? You know, or at least there is this year. It fluctuates because of scheduling and stuff. But you know, this is a team that can win 20 games, make a run in the SEC tournament, make a run in the NCAA tournament. It's just I don't think yet. You know, if we lost to Louisville by 15, maybe I would have changed my expectations. If we would have beat Louisville by 15, well, I guess we did beat them by 10. But if we would have beat Louisville by 20, you know, maybe I would have changed it a little bit. But Katie, I don't think anything through these first 5 games is enough to tell me. Maybe it's just because we had a good read on it. But I would say there's nothing that I saw that's like, oh, we're going to be much better or much worse than I thought we'd be.
Yeah, I think I haven't changed my mind really either. I had Kentucky finishing anywhere from 22-6 to 19-9, so I think any of that is possible. I just think that 5 games in, it's kind of hard to tell, especially you have a big win, but you haven't played 5 really good teams and you haven't beaten 5 really good teams. You've beaten 1 really good team and 1 pretty decent team that almost beat you, and then 3 teams that you kind of wiped the floor with. And so I don't feel like anything super special has happened yet. Even though the Louisville win was special and it's a big win for the program, it's not enough for me to change my mind about what I think the outcome is going to be.
I'd have to agree with that, yeah.
And then final question is from Jared KSR. Asked, how big of an impact have the 2 injuries of Dominika Parova and Jordan Obi have had on the regular bench usage? The only bench player who got much run last game was Cassie Rowe, and it seems like coach doesn't trust anybody else right now.
I don't know if I'd go as far as to say he doesn't trust anybody else. I think, again, that's like we said before, he just has a lot of trust in that really 5 or 6 players there. But obviously, I think I didn't think the rotation would be this tight or this small. So preseason, I would have told you, yes, the injuries suck, but I don't think they affect it that much. Well, no, I think now they do, right? I think Obi and Parova, I don't know if they both would have started. Obi certainly would have started, I think. But, you know, I don't think there's you know, it's very clear now that 2 of your key wing rotational pieces aren't there anymore. But, you know, needless to say, though, I just feel like I think Kentucky's still okay. It's just moving forward. Can you expand that bench? You know, can you get Sanaya Tyler and Lexi Blue and Tana Becker? Can you give them more minutes?
I think that the problem with the injuries was that obviously you never anticipate an injury happening, and when you're building a roster, you kind of have your backups for those positions, but they're not your number ones. And I kind of feel like Parova and Obi were going to start as a 3 and a 4. And I think that the intention was to have Amelia Hassett and Tiani Key as the backups to them, and then have Lexi Blue and Tana Becker as the backups to them. So I don't feel like it was intentional for Brooks to have Lexi Blue as like the second in command when it comes to who's going to replace Amelia or Tiani on the floor. I think that Lexi Blue is really good, but she's also very young, so she doesn't have much experience. And so I think it's good that she's getting reps, but it also would have been interesting to see someone with a little bit more experience there, like Dominika Prova or Jordan Obi. I think it's interesting to think about how different this team would be had they not been injured, and what the rotation would be like. It definitely would be, I think, a lot more flexible.
Right. I think I'd have to definitely agree with that. Just, the rotation, it looks small, and it is, but I don't expect that to stay the same. And I think, like we talked about, Lexi Blue, Sinai Tyler, Tana Becker all get some more run.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you to everyone who submitted questions on KSR or on the KS board. Of course, subscribe to KSR Plus. We have new deals going on, but like basically all the time. I know nobody likes to pay money, but it's not like we're asking for $100 a month out of you. I think there's pretty good stuff on there. We, and not just our stuff with women's basketball. Obviously, there's men's basketball, football, baseball now here. We got a lot coming, always new content. So be sure to check out KS Board. Katie, we're going to wrap it up here. Exciting maybe Purdue Fort Wayne wasn't as exciting, but exciting Louisville game, and you have an exciting stretch coming up. Do you have any final thoughts before we finally get out of here?
No, it just feels weird to not be a Memorial until December 9th, but I already can't wait to get back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we play Queens, who I remember we talked about when we did our preseason picks. We were like, where's Queens? And I was like, oh, probably Queens, New York. And somebody reached out on Twitter, and they're like, no, it's in North Carolina. And I was like, well, I was close enough, I guess. But I'm Phoenix Stevens. This is Katie Hutchison. We're going to get out of here. We will see you all next time.